Welcome to the Grey Havens Hour, a place for listening rather than haste, for reflection rather than argument. Here, we do not return to Tolkien to master his world, but to sit with it for a while and hear what it still has to say. In this journey, we will move slowly, from voices shaped by memory and fading, to voices weighed down by duty and command, to voices that learned when to withdraw, and finally, to the quiet speech of home. This is not a series about heroes alone. This is about what remains when heroism has passed. You don't need to rush this. You don't need to catch every word. Let it linger. Let it unfold. We begin where memory first learned to sing, with the elves, and the voices shaped by fading light. For the elves, the world moves, and it moves both very swift and very slow. This is where the elves stand, not at the beginning of Middle-earth, and not quite at its end, but watching it pass. For them, time is not a river that carries everything away. It is something they walk beside, watching others pass downstream. They remember the world as it once was, not as legend, but as lived experience. They remember light that has never returned, names that have never been spoken again, beauty that has no echo in the present age. And because they remember, they speak differently. The elves are not rulers of history. They are its witnesses. They do not shape the world towards some final triumph. This is why elvish voices so often take the form of song. Not because they are sentimental, not because they wish to decorate the world, but because song is what remains when action no longer can. Elvish song is memory made audible. What cannot be held in stone or law or kingdom is carried instead in voice. A song does not stop the world from changing, but it remembers what the world once was. And so elvish songs are rarely songs of victory. They are laments, remembrances, farewells spoken before the parting has fully come. They sing of things already lost and of things that are slipping away, even as they are named. This is the language of fading. And even among the elves, not all songs rise from the same memory. Some sing with remembrance of a light once seen, voices shaped by the two trees, whose beauty they beheld before the world was wounded. Galadriel remembers it. So did Finrod, who carried that memory into exile, knowing it would never fully return. Their songs carry longing for something not imagined, but known. Others sing without that remembrance. Thranduil never walked beneath that light, nor did the elves of the Greenwood. Their love for Middle-earth was not measured against Valinor, but rooted in forests, rivers, and passing seasons. Legolas speaks from that inheritance, a voice shaped by the world as it is, not by memory of what lay beyond it. One voice mourns the fall from light, the other endures without ever having seen it. Both are faithful, both are marked by loss. And together they form a chorus, shaped not by what was promised, but by what must be carried. Their words turn backward, not in despair, but in faithfulness. They do not deny loss, they honour it. Where other peoples answer loss by building walls, towers, monuments meant to endure, the elves answer with voice. Stone cracks, cities fall, even realms of great beauty pass into memory, but a song can cross water. It can pass from age to age. It can be carried by those who were not yet born, when the sorrow first entered the world. To sing for the elves is to admit a painful truth, that beauty cannot be owned. It can only be loved and then released. This is why elvish song never seeks to command the world to stay. It does not grasp, it does not bind. It walks beside what is passing and gives it a voice as it goes. And this is where the sorrow of immortality enters. For to remember forever is not simply to preserve joy, it is to carry grief that does not heal with time. Every wound remains present, every farewell echoes, every joy becomes fragile, because it is always shadowed by the knowledge of its end. The elves know that Middle-earth is not their final home. They love it, deeply, faithfully, but they do not belong to its future. And so, eventually, their voices turn west. Not in defeat, not in despair, but in release. The West is not an escape from memory. It is the laying down of memory's burden. The song that once preserved what was lost is finally allowed to fall silent. The voice that carried the world's sorrow is permitted to rest. Memory does not fade in the same way for everyone. Some carry loss in song, letting beauty linger even as it slips beyond reach. They sing not to preserve what is passing, but to honour what it once was. Some carry loss in song, letting beauty linger even as it slips beyond reach. Others respond differently. When the world begins to change, they turn inward. They gather what remains. They close their hands around memory, so it cannot be taken from them. Not every grief is voiced aloud. Some grief is guarded. Where song releases, silence preserves. And so, as light recedes from the world, we turn now to a voice that does not sing its sorrow, but keeps it safe, deep within stone. For the Dwarves have a secret language of their own, which they do not willingly teach to any. It's a simple sentence, almost clinical in its wording, and yet it carries a world of meaning. Because Tolkien is not simply telling us that dwarves are private. He shows us what happens when a people survive by turning inward. The dwarves do not announce themselves to history. They do not scatter their heart across the world in song. They gather it. They hold memory close, not only in story, but in stone. Not only in words, but in craft. For the dwarves, The past is not something to be recited in public squares. It is something set into the walls, hammered into metal, carved into halls that outlast generations. Their voice is not absent, it is concentrated. And if you have ever walked into a place that feels older than the people inside it, a cathedral, a mountain, a deep old forest, you know something of this dwarvish posture. The dwarves do not speak to fill the air. They speak when speech is necessary. And they keep silent the rest of the time, like a weight carried with purpose. This is where Khosdul matters, not as a linguistic curiosity, not as a trivial note for lore enthusiasts, but as a sign of what dwarves believe about words. The dwarves did not withhold their words because they were cruel, but because words had proven costly. Khosdul, their true tongue, was taught to them by Aule himself, and it was kept close, spoken among kin, guarded from the world. Even their names were divided, one offered outwardly, another held inward. What was spoken could be taken, what was kept endured. And yet there was a time when that silence was not fully settled. The doors of Moria were made in friendship, not fear. A door that did not answer to command, strength, or authority. It opened to a single word: friend. Not a password of mastery, but an approach of trust. By the time Gandalf stands before it, the door remains. But the people who made it are gone, and the world that trusted so easily had passed. The door remembers what dwarves once believed, that silence could choose openness, even as their voices, shaped by loss, have learned to close again. That door is more than a doorway. It is a memory. A memory of a time when dwarvish silence did not mean isolation, when keeping one's word close did not mean keeping one's heart closed. And that is part of the tragedy Tolkien gives us. Because the dwarves have not become silent for no reason. They have lost. They have been driven out of their homes. They have watched halls that took ages to carve become dark and hostile. They have seen treasures stolen, kin shattered, names diminished to rumours. And when a people lose what they built slowly, they learn not to spend their trust quickly. So their grief goes underground. And if elvish sorrow moves like music, flowing outward, turning memory into lament, dwarvish sorrow settles like stone. It does not disappear, it compacts. Dwarves do not sing, yes, Tolkien gives them songs of deep places, of hammers and mountains, of gold and exile. But even their singing has weight to it. It does not soar, it tolls. A dwarvish song is often not a celebration, but a remembering, a record of what was taken, a way of saying, we were here, we built this, we endured this, and because they endure, they guard. Their privacy is not a trick. It is a habit formed by centuries. But here is where Tolkien is always sharper than we expect. He does not romanticize guardedness. He shows its strength, but he also shows its cost. Silence protects, yes, but silence also isolates. When grief is never given air, it can harden. When words are always withheld, the heart can begin to believe it is the safest alone. And what begins as caution can become stubbornness. What begins as endurance can become pride. And this is why the dwarves, at times, seem difficult to move, difficult to change, difficult to persuade. It's not because they are simple, it is because they are heavy with what they carry. We'll return to that, but first, notice what the dwarves choose instead of explanation. They make, they build, they craft. If the elves respond to fading beauty by singing it into remembrance, the dwarves respond by shaping beauty into something that can be touched. A hall, a gate, a blade, a cup, a single carved line that remains when the tongue falls silent. In dwarvish life, making is a form of speech. Stone is not only shelter, it is testimony. Metal is not only wealth, it is memory hammered into form. And this is why their realms matter so deeply. Khazad-dûm is not just a location. Erebor is not just a mountain. They are the dwarves' sentence spoken in stone. They are what a people say when it does not speak easily. But the same devotion that makes their craft so enduring can also become a trap. For if your identity is in what you have made, then to lose it is not merely to suffer loss, it is to suffer diminishment. And if your words are guarded, then when bitterness comes, it has few paths out. This is why Thorin matters here. Not because this episode must become a character study, but because Thorin shows us what happens when dwarvish silence becomes too closed. He's not a villain, he's a wounded king. He carries exile like a stone in his chest. He carries the weight of a people's humiliation and longing. And when the treasure is finally reclaimed, something in him tightens rather than loosens. Gold becomes not merely wealth, but proof. Proof that loss was not final. Proof that the world cannot take everything. And so his silence deepens. He becomes harder to reach. His words become sharper when they come at all. Until at last, when the end nears, the silence breaks into a rage and into clarity. And we see what Tolkien so often reveals, that redemption, when it comes, is rarely dramatic. It is simple. A return to truth. That is one of the greatest mercies Tolkien gives the dwarves. That their silence is not their doom, it is their burden. And burdens can be set down. So what is the voice of the dwarves? It is not the loudness of a people, it is the weight of a people. A voice that speaks through stone and craft, through names kept close, through words that are not thrown into the air as if they were cheap. There's something to admire in that, but there is also something to learn from its cost, because not all memory can be carried inward forever. Not all grief can be kept under the mountain. There comes a point when remembrance must be shared. not because secrecy is wicked, but because isolation cannot heal. There is a strength in what is kept. Silence can protect what time could otherwise erode. It can shelter memory from careless hands and preserve identity against forgetting. But silence has limits. What is hidden cannot always sustain a people. What is sealed too tightly may endure, but alone. There are moments when memory must move outward, when it must be spoken, shared, carried on the open air. Some truths survive by being protected. Others survive when being spoken together. And so we turn now from halls carved in stone to voices carried on the wind. Even the bravest people cannot remember alone forever. There comes a point when grief, carried in silence, grows too heavy, when memory, held inward, begins to bend the soul rather than strengthen it. At some moment, remembrance must be spoken, not to ease what was lost, but so that those who remain do not forget who they are. Where now the horse and the rider? Where is the horn that was blowing? These are not questions asked in search of answers. They are questions spoken so that loss is not forgotten. This is the voice of Rohan. Rohan is not a people of books and towers. Their story is not preserved in libraries or carved in marble halls. It is carried on the tongue. Songs pass from rider to rider, from hall to campfire, from one generation to the next. Names are spoken aloud, so they are not lost. Deeds are remembered, not to glorify the living, but to honour the dead. Rohan understands something essential. Memory weakens when it is carried alone, so they speak it. They sing, not because the past was perfect, but because it mattered. Rohirrim's songs are not songs of victory, they are laments shaped into courage. They name what has been lost, so that the living may still ride. They speak grief alone, so it does not rot in silence. In Rohan, to remember is not to look backwards in despair, but to steady the present. That is why their songs rise before battle, not after it. Song here is not ornament, it is preparation. And no figure shows this more clearly than Theoden. When we first see him, Theoden is not merely weakened, he is diminished in voice. He sits inward, shrunken, waiting. His posture is the posture of despair. He has not only forgotten how to rule, he has forgotten how to speak as a king. Despair, in Tolkien's world, is not loud, it is quiet, it silences. Gandalf does not restore Theoden with command or strategy. He does not begin with swords or plans, he begins with words. He reminds Theoden who he is. He restores memory before action. The king must speak again before he can rise. This is crucial. Theoden does not stand because he is suddenly strong. He stands because he remembers. He remembers his people. He remembers his line. He remembers the song that named courage long before he bore the crown. And as his voice returns, so does his stature. Song, in Rohan, is not entertainment, it is rehearsal. It rehearses identity, it speaks courage into being before courage is demanded. Once Theoden's voice is restored, the sword can matter again. Before that, it cannot. Words break despair before swords break enemies. This is Tolkien's quiet pattern. Violence without remembered identity is meaningless. Action without voice is hollow. And Theoden's renewal does not end with him. When the king speaks rightly again, the people remember themselves. Riders answer not because they are commanded, but because they are recognized. Memory, spoken aloud, becomes courage shared. This is the strength of Rohan, but Tolkien does not romanticize it. Song cannot prevent death. Courage does not erase loss. Rohan's voice does not save every rider, it carries them. The fallen are named, they are not forgotten. And as riders pass, their voices fade into the wind, but the song remains, as long as someone is willing to speak it again. When voices rise together, they become tradition, and tradition, over time, becomes responsibility. What was once sung freely must sometimes be held across generations. Memory outlives those who first spoke it. Songs become records. Stories become duties. Words are no longer offered, they are entrusted. And with that trust comes weight. Not every voice can remain light forever. Some must learn to carry what others began. We turn now to a voice shaped by inheritance, where memory is no longer shared in song, but born as obligation. There is a particular kind of weight that does not come from what you choose, but from what you inherit. Words you did not coin, but must still carry. Names you did not earn, but must still answer to. Expectations that arrive already formed, already heavy, already waiting. Some people speak because they have something to share. Others speak because their office requires it. And in Tolkien's world, few voices are more shaped by inherited weight than the voice of Gondor. Rohan remembers aloud. Its songs rise on the wind, shared by riders who carry grief together. But Gondor remembers differently. Its memory is written on stone and record. Its words are shaped by ceremonies, lineages, and the long shadow of what once was. And at the heart of Gondor stands a sentence that sounds simple, but carries an entire history of absence. We are stewards, not kings. Say it slowly, and you can hear what it contains. It is humility, and it is grief. It is discipline, and it is longing. It is devotion, and it is loss. Because a steward speaks with the weight of kingship, but without its freedom. The steward must preserve what he cannot complete. He must hold a throne that is not his. He must keep a realm alive in the long waiting between what was and what may never return. Gondor's voice, therefore, is not primarily the voice of hope. It is the voice of custody. It speaks to prevent collapse. It speaks to keep continuity intact. It speaks so that the past does not vanish into forgetfulness. And yet, there is a cost to a voice that speaks always from duty. When words become obligation, they can lose warmth. When language becomes office, it can create distance. Titles multiply, protocols harden, speech rises into formality, not always out of pride, but because formality is how a weary people preserve dignity when everything else is fraying. Gondor's words often sound elevated, and they are, but elevation can become separation, and that is where Denethor enters. Denethor is too often reduced to a single note: madness, bitterness, failure. But Tolkien does not write him that way. Denethor is a man shaped by words. He is learned, articulate, disciplined. He speaks like a steward should speak, with precision, with control, with the awareness that each phrase must hold the weight of a crumbling world. Denethor understands his role as vigilance, holding the line, guarding the past, preventing a final break. And because he believes collapse is always near, his language becomes defensive. Not theatrical, not sentimental, defensive. At first, that defensiveness can look like strength, but over time, something narrows. His words lose warmth. He speaks at others rather than with them. A dialogue becomes proclamation, and proclamation becomes accusation. The stewardship that was meant to be held in trust begins to feel like territory. Words become possession. Titles become armor. Memory becomes a fortress. And behind that fortress is a fear Denethor will not name. Not simply fear of defeat, but fear of meaninglessness. Because if Gondor falls, then what were all the years of holding? If the line breaks, then what was the purpose of the long, faithful endurance? That is why Denethor reaches for knowledge with such hunger. He believes that seeing more will protect more, and so vision replaces trust. What should have become counsel becomes surveillance. What should have become wisdom becomes fear. And the tragedy is this: Denethor begins to confuse bearing the burden alone with faithfulness. He isolates himself, not because he does not love Gondor, but because he believes love must be proven by solitary endurance. Silence in him is mistaken for strength, but it is entrapment. He does not merely lose hope. He comes to believe that duty forbids hope. And when duty forbids hope, language hardens. It can no longer bless. It can only defend. And eventually, it can only wound. When words are held to keep the world from breaking, they may break the speaker instead. This is Denethor's tragedy. Not villainy, tragedy. Because there is a voice Gondor is always meant to reach. A voice that does not cling to inherited words like a final possession, but lays them down when their purpose is fulfilled. And that voice is Aragorn. Aragorn is marked by a long and patient restraint. He carries many names, but does not insist on any. He has lineage enough to justify claim, but he does not weaponize it. He does not announce himself as king. He waits. This is not indecision, this is integrity. Because Aragorn understands that titles taken too early corrupt the soul. So he refuses to claim inherited words before the world is ready to hear them rightly. His speech is measured. When he speaks of who he is, it is not to elevate himself, but to serve others. His words remain rational, not positional. And the contrast with Denethor becomes clear without being cruel. Both men carry ancient names. Both stand under the long shadow of kingship. But one hoards memory because it is all he has left. The other releases memory because he trusts what it points towards. Denethor clings, Aragorn relinquishes. And this is where kingship becomes, in Tolkien's world, not merely authority, but liberation. When Aragorn finally accepts the crown, his language becomes freer, not harder. The king does not need to guard words like a fortress. He can afford gentleness. He can afford mercy. He can afford to speak, not only to preserve the past, but to heal the present. His defining posture is not yet, a refusal to grasp. And it is precisely this restraint that makes his eventual acceptance clean. Because in Tolkien's world, true authority does not seize, it is received. And when it is received rightly, a strange thing happens. Words that had become weight become gift again. Speech that had hardened into office softens into relationship. Memory, held for generations like a burden, is finally permitted to rest. This is what the anchor quote means in its simplest sense. We are stewards, not kings. It is not merely an admission of limitation, it is a confession that stewardship was always meant to end. Not in failure, in fulfillment. Stewardship is not abolished when the king returns. It is completed. And so the voice of Gondor, at its best, is not the voice of endless holding. It is the voice that knows when to lay down what it carried. And that is what Denethor could not do. Not because he was weak, but because he was wounded. He could not imagine that laying down the burden was faithfulness rather than betrayal. He could not imagine that trust might be stronger than vigilance. And so his words collapsed inward, until speech no longer connected him to people, only to fear. But Aragorn shows the other way, that duty can be fulfilled without becoming possession, that memory can be honoured without being hoarded, that authority can be held without hardening the heart. And yet, even here, Tolkien does not let us end in grandeur, because once words become too formal, too weighted by office and history, truth finds quieter mouths. There comes a moment when words grow too heavy to carry. When speech, shaped by duty, begins to fracture under the weight of expectation. When memory, preserved too tightly, starts to wound those who hold it. And when that happens, truth often finds quieter mouths. Not voices trained for halls or councils, not words measured by lineage or title, but words shaped by daily life, by humour, by affection, by care. Words spoken not to preserve history, but to remain human within it. We turn now to voices that speak plainly and carry more than they know. Most voices in the world try to make themselves heard. They rise in volume. They sharpen their words. They reach for authority, certainty, command. But some voices endure precisely because they do not. They do not compete for attention. They do not demand agreement. They speak simply, and they keep speaking, long after louder voices have fallen silent. I am only quite a little fellow in a wide world after all. It is not a complaint. It is not false modesty. It is a clear-eyed naming of scale. Hobbits do not pretend the world is small. They simply refuse to pretend they are large. Their speech reflects this posture. Hobbits favour plain words, gentle humour, understatement. They speak to one another, not over one another. Their language is shaped by kitchens, gardens, lanes and fields, by places where speech is meant to bind people together, not set them apart. This is not ignorance. It is wisdom practiced daily. Hobbits understand something that many cultures forget. Words do not need to be impressive to be true. Their voice matters here. Hobbit laughter is not escapism, it is resistance. It refuses to let fear have the final say. It keeps the world human when darkness presses it. When Gondor's speech grows heavy with history, and Rohan's speech rises to steady courage, Hobbit humour gently interrupts despair. It says, "We are still here." And no Hobbit embodies this voice more clearly than Samwise Gamgee. Sam does not speak from theory or destiny. His words are rooted in work, in soil, in care, in daily effort. He speaks as one who knows what it is to tend something fragile, to return again and again to what must be kept alive. Sam does not hunger to be heard. He speaks because someone needs to hear. His language is practical, emotional, unpolished. And because it is unpolished, it carries extraordinary weight. Sam names things plainly: fear, weariness, hope, love. He does not disguise truth behind cleverness. He does not elevate himself through speech. His words are offered like bread, not to impress, but to sustain. This is where Sam reveals one of the most deepest moral postures in Tolkien's world: the refusal to command. Even when Sam bears unbearable responsibility, even when he carries the ring, his voice does not change. He does not issue orders. He does not assert authority. He does not bend others to his will. Power passes through his hands, and it does not reshape his speech. His words remain relational. He speaks to Frodo, not over him. He speaks with others, not at them. And when Frodo can no longer speak, when pain, weariness, and burden silence him, Sam does not fill the silence with control. He fills it with presence. He names hope when Frodo cannot. He carries the voice when the voice fails. This is not heroism, as the world often defines it. It is faithfulness. Sam's loyalty is not sealed by oaths. It is spoken again and again in small phrases. I'm here. I won't leave. Just one more step. His devotion is voiced through repetition, not ceremony, and that repetition matters. Because endurance is rarely secured by a single great moment. It is sustained by returning again and again to what must be done next. Sam's hope is not illusion. He does not deny darkness. He sees it clearly. But he believes goodness can still be chosen inside it. This is not optimism. This is courage without rhetoric. He does not speak of glory or greatness. He speaks of getting through the next mile, the next hour, the next act of care. In this way, Sam becomes the quiet moral centre of the entire story. Not because he leads armies, not because he claims authority, but because his voice never leaves the human scale. He reminds us that speech does not need to conquer the world to keep it from falling apart. And yet, Tolkien is careful here, as always. Hobbit voices are not sufficient by themselves. They are resilient, not fragile. Hobbits cannot bear the full weight of the world alone. They need protection, they need community, they need a place to return to. Their voice carries the journey, but it cannot complete the healing. And this is where the story must turn towards home. Because after the hero returns, changed by what he has seen, the world he returns to must answer that change. Ordinary speech prepares the way, but it must settle somewhere. It must take root. Love speaks freely. It listens before it answers. It remains present even when it is afraid. It allows space for response. But not every place permits speech to move this way. There are voices that do not invite reply. Voices that do not listen, only direct. Where words are no longer shared, but issued. Where silence is enforced, not chosen. Where speech exists only to remove freedom from others. We turn now to a voice stripped of relationship, and what becomes of a world when language is reduced to control. There is but one Lord of the Ring, only one who can bend it to his will. This is not a boast. It is not persuasion. It is a claim that ends conversation. In Mordor, voice has been reduced to a single function: command. There are no songs here, no laments, no shared memory. There is no telling of stories, no naming of the dead, no speech offered for comfort or understanding. Language exists only to enforce. Words do not move between people, they descend. Orders replace dialogue. Threats replace meaning. Silence is not chosen, it is imposed. This is the final distortion of voice in Tolkien's world. Not speech used badly, but speech emptied of relationship altogether. Command without communion. In Mordor, no one is addressed as a person. They are addressed as a function. March, build, fight, obey. There is no why. There is no who. Names disappear. Identities flatten. Speech no longer recognizes the listener. It only seeks compliance. This is why Mordor cannot remember. Memory requires relationship. It requires someone to speak and someone else to receive. But command does not remember. It only repeats itself. And the ring is the purest expression of this logic. The ring does not argue. It does not persuade. It does not appeal. It compels. Its power is not that it makes promises, but that it removes choice. Even when the voice is internal, even when no words are spoken aloud, the coercion remains. This is what makes the ring so dangerous. It does not corrupt speech by making it louder. It corrupts speech by replacing it. Desire becomes instruction. Fear becomes obedience. And slowly, the self is overwritten. This is why the contrast with Sam matters so deeply. Sam bears the ring briefly, and yet his voice does not change. He does not issue commands. He does not assert authority. He does not bend others to his will. Power passes through his hands, but it does not reshape his speech. In Mordor, power erases voice. In Sam, voice resists power. That difference is everything. Because Mordor does not simply rule through fear, it rules through the annihilation of speech. Even silence here is not rest, it is vacancy. We'll return to that, but first, consider what Mordor cannot do. It cannot create. It can organize labor. It can compel movement. It can marshal force. But it cannot make meaning. There is no true craft in Mordor, only imitation. No healing, no growth, no renewal. Command can direct effort, but it cannot give purpose. And because it cannot give purpose, it cannot endure. That is the great irony of Mordor. It appears total, unbreakable, inevitable, but it is hollow. A world held together only by orders has no internal strength. The moment command falters, nothing remains to hold the fragments together. Fear cannot repair what fear destroys. When the ring is unmade, Mordor does not grieve, it collapses. Not into quiet, not into remembrance, into emptiness. Because there was never a shared voice to begin with. This is why Mordor leaves no culture behind. No songs, no stories, no healing words, only ruins. Command exhausts itself. A voice that never listens eventually speaks into nothing. And Tolkien is unflinching here. This is not merely a political critique, it is a moral one. A world cannot be sustained by coercion. A people cannot be bound together by orders alone. Speech without humility corrodes the speaker. Power without love devours itself. A voice built only on command cannot endure. Control exhausts itself when nothing is shared. Fear holds for a time, but it cannot sustain meaning. And when such voice collapses, the answer is not firmer rule or louder authority, it is restraint. There are forms of authority that exist only to guide. Voices meant not to remain, but to prepare others to speak freely. Not every answer speaks loudly. Some answers step aside, so that the world can learn to stand on its own. I am a servant of the sacred fire, wielder of the flame of Ardnor. This is not a declaration of dominance, it is a confession of limits. A servant speaks with authority, not with ownership. With purpose, not with possession. The Mayar were never sent to rule Middle-earth, they were sent to help it become free. They are not kings, they are not masters, they are mediators, standing between what is eternal and what must be lived in time. Their voices interpret, they warn, they steady, and they are not meant to remain. As long as guardians stand visibly in the world is not yet grown. And this is the tension that runs through the age of the wizards. Because authority that remains forever does not protect freedom, it delays it. Among the Mayar, no figure embodies restraint more faithfully than Gandalf. Gandalf's voice was never loud, never final, never coercive. He persuades rather than commands. He questions rather than declares. He reminds rather than controls. His authority is marked by one defining posture, the refusal to rule. Gandalf knows the truth that Mordor denies and Saruman forgets. That power which insists on staying will eventually corrupt what it was meant to serve. So Gandalf trusts others to act freely. He allows them to fail. He allows them to choose. Even when he sees further, even when he knows more, he does not seize control of the outcome. And when his task is complete, he does something almost unheard of in stories shaped by power. He stops, not in defeat, not in bitterness, but in fulfillment. I was the enemy of Sauron, and my work is finished. There is no triumph in the words, no claim of lasting authority, only completion. The voice that guided does not linger. It does not reshape the world in its own image. It steps aside, so the world may live without it. This is the true mark of the Mayar at their best. They are not sent to rule history, but to prepare it for the moment when guidance must end. But not all Mayar choose that path. Saruman begins where Gandalf stands. He is wise, learned, eloquent. His early voice is one of counsel, measured, persuasive, invitational. He convinces through reason. He speaks with others, not over them. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, his language changes. Expertise hardens into certainty. Counsel narrows into instruction. He begins to speak at others rather than with them. And then comes the Palantir. Through it, vision replaces listening. Knowledge becomes surveillance. When you no longer need to hear others, your words stop responding to them. Saruman's speech begins to close. Then comes his alignment with Sauron. Not at first through obedience, but through imitation. Saruman adopts the tone of inevitability. He speaks as though outcomes are already decided, as though resistance is ignorance, as though agreement is merely a matter of time. Dialogue disappears. Command arrives wearing the clothes of reason. Tolkien is precise here. Saruman's voice becomes enchantment, not because it shouts, but because it bends. This is the most dangerous authority of all. Command that pretends to be counsel. Agreement is assumed. Dissent is dismissed. And though Saruman can still speak beautifully, he can no longer speak truthfully. His words are detached from relationship, detached from humility, detached from reality. When his power collapses, his language collapses with it. Grandeur sinks into spite. Eloquence degrades into bitterness. Command without authority becomes noise. Saruman shows us how authority falls, not all at once, but syllable by syllable. There is another path among the Mayar, Radagast. Radagast the Brown withdraws, but too far. He turns from power towards care, from command towards gentleness, and yet, in his retreat, he risks abandoning responsibility altogether. Radagast reminds us that restraint still requires presence. Withdrawal is not the same as indifference. The Mayar walk a narrow path. Too much authority and the world is smothered. Too little engagement and the world is left alone too soon. Which brings us to the heart of this episode. Why must the Mayar leave at all? Because as long as they remain, the world cannot stand on its own. Their presence delays maturity. Their guidance, however wise, keeps responsibility from fully transferring. Victory, in Tolkien's world, is not secured by eternal oversight. It is secured by relinquishment. This is the great difference between withdrawal and abandonment. The Mayar do not leave because they failed. They leave because they succeeded. Their task was never to remain. It was to prepare others to live without them. And so the age of guidance ends. The wizards fade, the guardians depart, not in triumph, in trust. Authority fulfilled becomes silence, power that makes room. This is the highest form of strength Tolkien can imagine. The voice that steps aside so that other voices may speak. And silence alone does not rebuild the world. After command collapses, after guidance withdraws, life must still continue. The world notices when great voices leave, when counsel falls quiet, when guardians step away. But absence is not abandonment. It is the moment when responsibility settles into ordinary hands. Life does not wait for great voices to return. It continues in places shaped by habit, work, and care. When the great voices leave, life must still go on. And so we turn now, at last, to a place where endurance speaks without ceremony. Well, I'm back. 4 words. No explanation, no summary of what was endured, no attempt to make meaning impressive, just return. And in those words, Tolkien quietly tells us everything. Because the Shire does not speak in declarations. It does not announce its importance. It does not explain itself to history. The Shire speaks through rhythm, through meals prepared and shared, through fields tended again after neglect, through doors repaired, gardens replanted, paths walked once again. Its voice is habit, routine, repetition, memory carried not in song or record, but in the way life is lived when no one is watching. Throughout this journey, we have listened to many voices. The Elves sang memory as it faded. The Dwarves guarded memory in silence. Rohan spoke memory together in courage. Gondor carried memory as inherited duty. The Hobbits carried memory through ordinary speech. Mordor reduced voice to command and collapsed. The Mayar guided, restrained, and then withdrew. And now, none of those voices remain at the centre. What is left is not absence, it is endurance. The Shire does not preserve the past by retelling it endlessly. It preserves it by continuing to live. This is why Tolkien does not end his story at the Grey Havens. The Havens are beautiful, but they're not the point. Departure is not the final truth. Continuation is. The Shire is not untouched by evil. That is one of Tolkien's hardest and most honest gifts. The scouring of the Shire reminds us that no place is protected forever by innocence alone. When evil reaches home, there are no kings to summon, no wizards to consult, no guardians left to intervene. There are only neighbours. The ordinary voices must now speak, not with command, but with shared resolve. Here, courage is not loud, it is communal. Decisions are made together, responsibility is shared, authority arises not from title, but from care. This is where endurance becomes moral labour. The Shire does not survive by accident. It survives because people choose, again and again, to repair rather than abandon, to tend rather than control, to remember without being consumed by loss. And at the heart of this endurance stands Samwise Gamgee. Sam does not rule the Shire. He does not command it. He does not withdraw from it. He stays. After walking through darkness no one else could endure, Sam returns and takes up ordinary work. He plants trees. He restores gardens. He raises children. He serves his neighbours. His voice becomes quieter still, not because it diminished, but because it no longer needs to prove anything. Sam shows us that the final form of courage is not heroism remembered, but life continued. This is memory without mastery. Loss is acknowledged, but not worshipped. Grief is real, but it does not become identity. The Shire remembers, but it refuses to be defined by what was taken from it. This is the difference between survival and endurance. Survival reacts to crisis. Endurance continues after the crisis ends. Survival asks, how do we get through this? Endurance asks, how do we live now? The Shire answers that question slowly, with uneven healing, with lingering scars, with patience, but it answers it faithfully. We'll return to that, but first, consider what the Shire never becomes. It does not become an empire. It does not turn its suffering into authority. It does not impose its way of life on others. It simply keeps going. This is why Tolkien trusted the small, the local, the ordinary. Not because they are pure, but because they are limited. And limitation, in Tolkien's world, is not a flaw to overcome. It is a boundary that protects the soul. The Shire endures because it knows what it is not meant to be. It does not seek to shape the world. It seeks to care for a corner of it. And that, Tolkien suggests, is enough. So the story ends where it always belonged. Not in triumph, not in explanation, not in departure, but in return. Well, I'm back. The voice that endures is not the one that changes history, but the one that lives faithfully after history has passed. And now, the voices fall quiet. Not because they have failed, not because they have finished speaking. What remains is not an answer, but a way of listening. Throughout this journey, we have heard many kinds of voices. Voices shaped by memory and loss, by duty and fear, by restraint and withdrawal, and finally, by endurance. Tolkien does not leave us with the loudest voice or the strongest one. He leaves us with the voice that continues when others have gone silent. Not a voice that commands or instructs or explains the world, but the voice that tends it. This is not triumph. It is not even a conclusion. It is a return. A return to work that must be done, to words spoken without ceremony, to care offered quietly, day after ordinary day. If these reflections have stayed with you, they were never meant to keep you here. They were meant to walk with you back into your own life, into the place where your voice matters. Not because it is heard by many, but because it is faithful where you stand. So as we part, carry what you need and lay the rest down. May your words be gentle, your silences chosen, and your days shaped by the quiet courage of those who endured. Until we meet again, go in peace and let life continue.